Hello, everybody. Welcome to Elevate.Strategy. I'm back. Glad you guys can join us. Would love to know where all of you guys are from. If you could drop a comment below, that'd be great. Um, Thank you all who signed up for, I guess, what is my comeback first show, whatever it is. I'm extremely excited to be here, and I've decided after, I guess, 2 years of having interviews and booking people that were fascinating and interesting, that actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on a bit of a solo broadcast in here because there's a lot of stuff to get to in the news around career development and management, etc. And quite frankly, I've been having a lot of client interaction over the past 6 months, I guess, 8 months since I was last here. And yeah, what I'd like to do is I'm starting this series about half an hour long every week, and just talking about different topics in the news. And if you have any areas that you want me to cover, and trust me, there's been a lot going on, right? As you all know, I'd love to take part in that, and each and every week if possible. So anyway, this is my foray back in. If you guys cannot hear me, please let me know. But if you can, I'd love to know where you're from, and yeah. So you have to bear with me because I have not been on platform for 6 or 8 months. But in any case, it's great to have you guys join us, and I look forward to all the questions and comments, even post broadcast. So anyway, I wanted to talk about today about artificial intelligence, because a lot of people are already talking about that. I don't want to repeat what everybody's already said because there's a lot of wisdom that's already on the internet, and what I wanted to do is add a bit of a spin to what I've observed in my career coaching and working with. I think probably for the past 8 months, probably about 15 to 20 executive clients since I last saw you guys and had my last interview, storytelling interview. So, but I wanted to take a different look at it. It won't be very long. It's going to be a half an hour short format. But any questions that you have, comments, I love engagement. I've learned that engagement is very important. And you guys all have voices to say around the table as well. So if you want to drop a note, let me know where you're from. Again, thank you all for signing up. It's great to see and be back here. So, all right, let's go on to today's topic. So when we talk about career management, we talk about coaching or sort of road mapping, if we're executives or if you're sort of straight out of college, university, undoubtedly we always get to the point where we need help, right? And so it could be help with resumes, it could be help with interviewing, it could be help with networking. But essentially what's happened is with things like chat GPT and other AI tools, it's really given us another source of resource, right, to get out there and to kind of get into the playing field and get noticed. But what I found very interesting is that there's a lot of conversation around this paranoia that chat GPT and AI are going to take over the world. And, undoubtedly there's a lot of ethical questions that start coming up, right? The first thing was, about, what about academic essays, or what about sort of generating report cards or resumes or whatever important documents that are automated and not done by us, but artificial intelligence. But I think in light of that, there's also opportunity to be able to adopt ChatGPT and other technology to help us along in that regard. So a couple of observations, first of all, just setting the stage for what artificial intelligence is. Very, very quick. Lots of stuff on the internet that you can look up, but essentially it's any intelligence that takes data and is able to process, synthesize it, and generate some sort of insight, right? So sometimes it's a bit of a call to action. So if it's perceived that you kind of shop a lot online for shoes, artificial intelligence in the background will scrape data and kind of tell you, hey, you might want to buy more shoes, right? It could be to do with not just a call to action, but maybe a prescription, right? So, for example, um, things that you have done in the past, you might correlate to something that's similar. It may not be in the same industry. If you've taken a cruise before, there might be sort of things that pop up in your feed about maybe going on a retreat of some sort, right? So but essentially, it's taking data. But the thing about artificial intelligence is that it takes data that already exists, right? And that makes sense because it's got to come from somewhere, right? When you ask something like ChatGPT a question, it's got to come from somewhere. And it's demonstrated by machines as opposed to human intelligence, right? And so one might argue, is there intelligence if it's artificial? That's a debate for another day. But the point, for example, is at the very simplistic level, even at Google, right, when you type in certain search engine keys, it does take things like metadata and kind of link with, a quick search and kind of come back with information. But in some sense, it's kind of like if you went to the library and you talked to the librarian and said, hey, where do I find this book on, the societal impact of the anthropologic, the Aztec, age. And the librarian would say, hey, go to this section. Google does the same thing, right? Essentially, it says, well, you've got keywords, you've got a question. So I'm going to complete your sentence and give you some information about that. So in some sense, getting and retrieving data for you is not that much of a big deal. But when it first came out, it really was. And that's sort of the form of a bit of artificial intelligence, even as it started. Now, ChatGPT is, I think it was launched in 2017, believe it or not. It's gone through a couple of iterations. So it started with, I think, GPT 2.0, and it had some bugs, and they fixed it in GPT 3.0, and fixed it again in GPT 3.5, which eventually is now what we know as ChatGPT. Okay. And so GPT itself stands for generated pre-trained transformer, right? And there's different reasons for that. Is it generated content? Obviously displays and generates some sort of cohesive or coherent kind of comments. Pre-trained means that they're actually artificial intelligence trainers. And these are folks who would take data and input it and sort of continuously run algorithms through it until the information was clean and it could be usable, right? And the T in ChatGPT is about transformers. So it's enabling data that's been transferred to insights to be able to be transformed in some sort of coherent way. Again, they give you some sort of response that's usable and friendly. And more advanced AI tools will use maybe mobile data analysis and maybe even some predictive behavior that is not just taking static data, but maybe does some sort of history extrapolating to the future kind of a thing. But there's also ethical concerns about artificial intelligence, right? So the first thing that came up was, well, what if I'm given a term paper and I have to write about some sort of topic that I know nothing about? Can I ask something like ChatGPT and can it generate something that's relatively decent? I think the answer is yes. I think we've all sort of experienced that before. So we all kind of been there before. Maybe if you've used ChatGPT, if you haven't used it, I would encourage you to try it out because it is actually quite amazing and mind-blowing. And it's GPT 3.5. So they actually, Microsoft actually implemented it and in over the past, I guess, 5 years have sort of tweaked it so that it's actually quite user-friendly, and they continue to evolve that as well. So that's what AI is fundamentally. It's a machine-based learning, which is taking existing data, synthesizing, processing it, and coming back to us as some sort of coherent language, right? And again, I won't go into details now, but the fundamental aspect of artificial intelligence, as in any intelligence, is language. And so whether it's coding language or whether it's speaking language, the key is that language is what coheres everything together, ideas, etc., right? Gives us inspiration. So in terms of how AI can help in developing or managing our career, various schools of thought have popped up, right? Some people say, well, ChatGPT can't ever create anything authentic to you because it'll just give you some generic answers, right? So if you said, for example, what needs to be on the cover letter of an accountant, right? The ChatGPT or an AI tool will come up with, several paragraphs that are very cohesive, probably quite comprehensive, but they're not really going to be representing who you are because you're an accountant and it's different than someone else's accountant, etc. It runs the gamut all the way to man, it is so cool. I can, I've got 5 job interviews coming up, and I want to know how to respond to different interview questions. And so I use some sort of AI tool to help me practice and all that. We'll talk about that in a second. Some examples of AI tools that are quite powerful and that we can use to help differentiate us in our career management. But I think one of the most craziest examples that I've seen is there's an Australian-based company that actually created a system that it's an AI system, and it recommends career transitions. So it actually looks at your career and how you're doing today, and maybe some performance analytics around how you're doing as far as compared to peers. But it'll actually give you some sort of prompts to say, at this point in your career, you might want to think about transitioning to another role, another position. And so it's quite incredible. And fundamentally, what that software does is that it measures similarities between skills required in each profession. So not only does it look at your performance information, but it looks at skills that are required for example, if you're an accountant versus a financial analyst, right? There's some overlapping skills, but it also does some analysis around typically where do people go from A to B, right? So what it's come back with accountants and financial analysts is that it tends to be that accountants become financial analysts versus vice versa, versus the other way around. And so it's very insightful, right? Because as an accountant, I might think, well, what is it on the other side of the fence, being a financial analyst, that would make me want to be able to take on that role, right? So it's an extremely powerful AI tool, and it's Australian based, and you can look them up. But that particular AI tool looks at a large set of real world career transition processes. So where they get that data from, various sources, right? So it looks at a number of different transitions and which ones have been successful and why that's the case. And then takes a look at what the root cause is for success. And then takes a look at your profile and say, it makes sense now that you've been in this role for 5 years to think about transitioning over to this kind of role, because in the past we've seen this happen. It's great. But it's incredible, because then what it comes along and does is it actually helps me plot my career path, right? So if I started off as I did in consulting, and I want to ask the question about typically how long should a consultant wait before they think about going to an industry, right? So for me, the answer was 3.5 years. I left my consulting role, I went to industry. But imagine an AI tool which could say, on average, globally, consultants move into industry after 7 years. And after 7 years, there's 65% chance that they extrapolate and become so angry people out there. Let's say 65% chance that going into industry, you might become CEO, right? So a bunch of data collected, career transition moves, and it's able to tell you that, listen, if I stay till 7 years and I move into industry, there's a 65% chance that I'm going to become the top of the company. If you stay with that. Now, you might ask ChatGPT is, do people go back from industry to consulting? And the answer might be yes. Why do they do that? Well, it'll come back with like a very coherent answer, which is incredible. So that's the kind of information where you just can't get anywhere else, right? Because it's using real-time data, and in some sense historical, but also predictive data. So I go back to the question about why do I say it's evidential current data that it draws from. If I'm talking about all these predictive analytics, it's fundamentally because it's still taking solid data. Somebody who was in Australia spent 7-8 years, somebody else spent 10 years, and they both went to industry, and their career trajectory was plotted out. Some way, shape, or form, they found out where they landed, right? This particular AI tool, and was able to correlate and said, hey, if you're, and even to some extent, sort of ethnic background too. So a lot of the demographic breakdown, we don't know where that data comes from, but with social media, our data comes into the system, the ether, through all various kinds of sources, right? So intelligent design, or AI, will say, let's get the best point of data and put it together into something that makes sense. That's the most extreme example that I've seen for AI tools that manage career, because it actually tells you career transition. But what about some other helpful AI tools? So ChatGPT is the most commonly spoken about AI tool. But as a career coach, you might think it's not incentivized for me to talk about tools, because those tools will probably replace a lot of what I do, right? But in essence, I want to talk about them because just as something that might be we're afraid of because we don't know very much about, we can also turn that around and leverage the positives of that to help us to succeed in our career, not just for my career as a coach, but also for yours as well. So we should never shy away from technology, but we should get under the hood and see what's the possibility at this point in time. We can never sort of predict where things are going to go, right? At some point, maybe it might make my role kind of, defunct, and kind of I might be out of a job, but that's fine, absolutely fine. But let me just talk about a few, AI tools except for ChatGPT, okay? So I'm going to give you five specific examples of where AI tools can help you, okay? Number one are resume builders, right? Resume builders have been around for a long time. They first sort of migrated from template based, fill in this thing here where it says your what and your so what and your metrics, and there's generate some sort of, combination of words that puts together, right? But AI today, as a resume builder, for example, Kick Resume or Resi, if you've heard about them, they do most of the work for you. I mean, essentially, you kind of even upload your LinkedIn profile, maybe some a little more information about yourself, but that's really all it is. And you kind of check hit the produce mark, and it produces a resume that's basically kind of from an achievement basis, who you are, what you've done, right? And then you can pick templates and stuff like that. So resume builders are great. They're really good. Another series of AI tools, the second one would be job matching tools. And I don't know if you know about that, but there are certain AI tools and software that have been created really to match you with job listings that are likely a good fit for you. And the way to do that is they based on your skills, your experience, and what you're looking for in a company or position. So there's going to be some sort of data input. They're going to ask you about that, right? Software like Talent Breeze or even Pajama. Pajama is a great AI tool which looks at specifically working from home jobs and roles there. And these two are just examples of AI tools that kind of almost like a matchmaker, right? Sort of match you with the job. There's a company called Forte that actually offers a quiz and it helps you narrow in on companies actually based on culture. So cultural fit, there's some way methodology that they find out from you what are your non-negotiables as far as culture goes, and it matches that with companies that have certain profiles, and then it sort of refines that down to maybe a couple of companies you might want to think about, right? So job matching tools are very important. Look for them. The third category of AI tools I would say are resume optimization tools. Okay, so these are tools that are not resume creation, but what they'll do is they'll optimize it to the job that you're applying for. And this is oftentimes sort of the key basis for the applicant tracking system keyword kind of a conversation, right? And I've seen some really great conversation on the internet and LinkedIn about, does ATS actually exist? Do these algorithms, are they that powerful, or is it more human being? And it's just really good to see the banter back and forth because people have different opinions about how effective that is. But these AI tools specifically, they optimize your resume and they tailor it based on sort of keyword search premises. Now, a company called JobScan, they actually compare your resume, your cover letter, and your LinkedIn profile against keywords that are found in the market, right? So that's a very powerful tool that takes basically your profile and it basically scours the internet for maybe commonly posted job descriptions or specific ones and comes back with saying you might want to apply for these ones, and it's sort of a recommendation engine, but more importantly, it kind of tailors more towards your holistic view of not just your achievements on your resume, but also what your profile is like on LinkedIn as well. All right, here. Let me just here for a second. I've got a number of comments coming in on my device here that are not on the screen. So trying to figure this out. Great. Hi, Adolfo, Mexican studying Canada. Welcome from Mexico. Yep, Adolfo, thank you for joining me. It's great to see you after, I guess, a couple of months. But okay, all right, let's keep going. So a fourth kind of AI tool that I found very helpful as far as leveraging your career management are they're GBT Google Sheets. They're add-ons that actually help you to personalize networking. I don't know if you guys know about that, but how often do we kind of write cover letters or some sort of introductory email and sort of a cut and paste, right? And the recipient, you might get their name wrong, you might get their company wrong, you might add a space here, or the role position is wrong. But what this particular add-in does is that it generates personalized outreach messages en masse. So essentially, it's an add-on. So you can look it up. It's a GPT Google Sheets add-on that allows you to customize your networking essentially. And the first step that it takes is sort of written, right? Networking. So an email or whatever message you want to send. And again, it's based on the recipient's LinkedIn profile, tweets, psychological AI tools. The important thing here is tweets as well, right? Because it does take a look at your other social media accounts, and it sees the kind of content that you place on there as well. And then also post engagement, when you're on a discussion forum, for example, what kind of questions do you ask? Now, it is scary, right? So if you put down, for example, Adolfo, I'll use an example. If you put your name down here, there's some AI tools that will say, you know what, this data can be used legitimately for generating what kind of a persona this recipient might be. So if I'm writing an email to a recipient who's been on my webcast and said something, interesting, then it's going to customize my outreach to them in a very specific way. Now, I've never used GPT Google Sheets, but I've seen a lot of demonstrations around it. And it's just great for when you're, let's say, coming out of university or college, and you're just trying to look for that job, the first job, and you want to be able to contact people in a very quick way. This is a great tool to have, right? The fifth area, I would just say the fifth and final, and there's a lot more, and we could talk about that, is AI-powered interview coaching tools. So one of the services that I provide is interviewing coaching, right? And it's a combination of different things. Interviewing is a combination of public speaking. It's a combination of analytical thinking, right? Because you're being asked on the spot to give examples and what metrics are there that show your achievements and why are they legitimate and all that. It's a combination of thinking fast on your feet, right? So it's improvisation, right? You've got to be able to pull up a little bit out of a hat, in a sense, be ready to respond to any kind of questions. And sometimes, let's face it, the questions are not the easiest to answer. Sometimes even the easiest ones are hard to answer, right? Tell me about a time when you've had this, that, and the other, and you don't really even know what the interviewer is really asking for. Sometimes they don't even know what they're asking for, but it's just asked. So, but these interview tools, for example, there's one called Interview Warmup, right? So Interview Warmup is a tool that you can use to practice your interviews in a very low stakes kind of environment, right? So there's really no pressure there. So it's Interview Warmup. I encourage you to look it up. It's really cool. It's actually powered by Google, and it was released a while back. At least its latest iteration. It's quite useful. And what it basically mimics is someone asking you 5 random questions and listening via your microphone to see what your response is, and then giving an analysis afterwards to say, how many business savvy words have you used? How many of them are related to something that a recruiter might be able to adopt into the role itself, and how many repetitive comments have you made, etc. So Interview Warmup is a great example, AI-powered interview coaching tool. And it also helps identify areas where you need to improve, for example, your tone, right? Your intonation or your pace. I tend to speak very quickly in certain forums, and then I just don't know if people understand what I'm saying. But these kinds of tools are very important. So again, we're moving away now from just the chat part, right, the GPT. But the generated pre-trained transformer approaches GPT, again, is essentially what each one of these tools does, is that there has to be some sort of pre-training of the tool itself. And I just envision that there's got to be some sort of department, right, in a company that does that in Google. I'm not entirely sure. I'd love to, if any of you guys are related in this field, to do pre-training, like what in the world is that? Because you're part of that P in GPT, right? And so anyway, there's some smart people out there that are doing this. But essentially, that's what the concept is for all of these different tools, whether you talk about resume builders, job matching tools, resume optimization tools, which is keyword sort of a thing, GPT Google Sheets, which does sort of the networking element of things en masse, personalized networking, and then AI-powered interview tools, right? I'm just going to take a look at the comments here. So I'm curious to know, how about you guys? Have you guys come across any AI tools that you find helpful? that people don't talk a lot about, drop a comment below. Would love to hear, because I haven't actually explored all the different IOs, right? .ios, whatever you want to call them. And many of them are actually additions. They're sort of the add-ons to, for example, Chrome extension, right? So, but I'm sure that there's many more that we haven't really even thought about that are being in development right now. Sometimes the best, so I came from an innovation background when I was in corporate doing strategy and operations. My focus was growth. And in innovation work, it's really about identifying an area of unmet need, right? So there's a need that people have that they may or may not know about, but you're trying to produce some sort of innovation that helps them to address that. A lot of times for artificial intelligence, I'm finding that it's actually creating a need. Um, you know, for example, I was watching this AI TED Talk, and the guy was saying that, we never knew that we needed a right to privacy until there were ways of documenting or capturing pictures, right? So imagine a world without cameras, without phones with cameras, and there was just no way of like taking a snapshot of you, like, gulping down a big spoon of spaghetti, right? Which is embarrassing. But we never knew that we needed, rules and laws for privacy. And, we're telling people don't. Now we're telling people do not publish photos unless you have my permission, and that's going into the territory of data privacy. So what happens is that the camera makers, while their intention is to kind of create this environment where on phones now there could be cameras and it's sort of very convenient. What's happening is that convenience has allowed picture taking to be ubiquitous, right? So you might be on a subway platform, like the recent controversy in New York, and there might be a fight breaking out, and you've got a camera in your phone. You just take a picture of it or video of it, and you post it without anybody's consent. But innovation, in a sense, has got that double-edged sword, right? It's both good, it's intended for good, but it's also creating issues around ethical usage and how much is too much. And I just wonder, with things like AI tools, to what extent do you think they'll go to before it either becomes kind of not any more useful because you've artificial intelligence-ized everything you can, and at some point you have to have a human being, right, in many roles, or at some point where it just might self implode. There's something to do with the way that it's creating the other side of the coin that just doesn't work out for people. And I request, will you send all the, yeah, sure, absolutely. I will put in the comments below all the tool names that I've been referring to today. And absolutely, no problem at all. So yeah, I'm curious to know, for all of you watching now and post broadcasts, I think all the listeners here would benefit from your knowledge about what's happening in the artificial intelligence world. And there continues to be a lot of debate, discussion, and kind of things that are coming out, a lot of implications that people are realizing about AI. Okay. So the question you might ask is, and maybe you don't ask because you don't care, but the question I asked myself today was, why am I talking about this? Because every single thing here, builder, job matching, resume optimization, networking, for instance, are all things that I do, right, for my clients. But the problem is that there's a lot of limitations around when you use existing data to put together something that's a coherent answer to otherwise a difficult question. It's because AI only provides the best response based on the facts as they are today. So it's kind of like a balance sheet. You know what I mean? So if I were to say, ask a CEO of a company, how are you guys doing as far as assets go? Well, he'll pull it out and say, like, this is how we're doing, right? This is the report, and it's an intelligent report. You can see how our health is. And the other thing is that AI can only produce a part of you. So if you're in ChatGPT and you're asking it to write a resume for you, it only shows maybe 2 dimensions of your 3-dimension, right? And I'll talk about what that third dimension is. It's not necessarily about kind of what you've done and you're achieved and your role titles, and maybe it might correlate the role title with an industry too, right? So financial services, it's kind of well known for a lot of VPs, right? Which is different than if you're retail. But it only captures a certain part of you, and at some point, it's got to bleed into this human territory of dynamic, and I'll talk about it in a second. So there's no AI tool that will be able to analyze and process for several things. And I've learned this the way of coaching, right? 4 P's. Number one is it cannot capture professionalism. In other words, I can have the best resume in the world and use that to leverage, right? Sure, use that, but it can't capture things like initiative. So if I'm talking to somebody whom I'm interviewing, their resume might be stellar, but I can't tell whether they're an initiated person who will take things into their hand and kind of move it forward until I speak with them, right? Quite frankly, it can't measure things like, are you faithful, right? You've said something, and are you going to do it? So basically, kind of like, are you a person of your word, right? These are important parts of what it means to work with other people. What about your sense of judgment? So everybody in their resume or their cover letter, whatever document is going to be like present the best before. They're going to say, I did this and that. I led a huge transformation, $50 million. But what about judgment, right? What about the parts of it that you failed at that nobody sees because you don't list it, right? And you might even talk about it in your interview. But those are, I mean, if you're a recruiter today watching, isn't that important to you? Isn't it just as important about what someone's done as it is about initiative, or as it is about judgment, right? How do you capture that, right? The second P that there's no AI tool can ever measure, in a sense, is potential, right? So when I'm interviewing for somebody, or if I'm being interviewed for a role, it is that role in that specific point in time for that specific need of the company. But the day after, the company already changes, and the need for different skills is going to change with it. Now, the potential of someone to grow into that person, into that new person that has new skills, is something that's unique to certain people, right? How many of us have met people on our team that you look at them, you're like, they're not quite there yet, but they have tremendous potential because of some sort of factor combination of hard work, intelligence, something like that, right? But how do you capture that in a document? I often wonder that. Um, and especially if everyone else is using something like an AI tool, everyone else is using AI tool to optimize your resume and to do interview preparation. And so everyone kind of starts sounding the same. Then you need an AI for AIs, right? Why not? You need an AI to kind of, whatever, right? But potential, you can't measure that. And that's one part of it is I'm not afraid to talk about these tools because primarily when I work with clients, I'm also talking to them about potential. You need to get flex, right, with your potential. What kind of a leader will you become, right? So how do I know that from your resume, or just a very quick phone call, right? What kind of a leader is important to you, and what kind of environment do you set as a leader? Or what about, what kind of a leader do you desire to become, right? So this initiative around aspiration is very important, especially in a culture and companies where they do a lot of lateral movement and then sort of the occasional kind of promotion, right? A lot of companies do that because they want a worker to get to know the organization as a whole. So potential, right? How do you measure that? AI tools can never measure persistence, right? Another P. So work ethic, right? That's tremendously important. That's got a lot to do with professionalism, um, grit, right? So unless you see somebody in action at a very difficult point in time, you don't know how much of their blood, sweat, and tears they're going to put into it, right? So how much they're going to clench their teeth and move forward and push it forward. They're going to be the change factor, the change force. So how do you measure persistence, right? Work ethic, grit, and going the extra mile. And this one has a lot to do with teamwork, whereby you've worked with folks before, I'm sure, who are particularly sensitive to the team and what their needs are. And what they'll do is sort of step in the foray of like a gap, for example, on behalf of someone else. They'll go the extra mile so that the team can succeed, right? And this is a personality character trait where, again, a tool like an AI tool you can only leverage that so far, right, to get to that field. But then at some point, the real person comes out, right? And as a coach, that's what I try to get to the heart of is what areas of work are you most passionate about and you're willing to put blood, sweat, and tears in there, right? But and the last P I would say is AI tools, they can't measure passion. And as part of value proposition for anybody, it's not just about the skills that you can do. It's not just about what you've learned and kind of your accomplishments, but it really is about um, at the end of the day, what skills and capabilities do you absolutely love doing? I mean, if you did that every single day, 24/7, that it would be like, it's not work because I can't believe I'm getting paid for this, right? But it can't measure passion. It can't measure what areas of work do you actually, that's a heat map, right? There's a hot spot there that I love to do these specific things. And that kind of goes into a little bit like a value proposition approach. It can't measure creativity. So AI tools, as best as they can help you optimize it to keywords. But at the same time, again, the human factor of it is creativity. And every job requires creativity. Things like you need to jerry rig something. Like if you don't have a system that will produce a report for you, but you need it for the CEO the next day, what are you going to do about it? Right? You have to think out of the box. You have to think about like what other data do you have? And how do you capture those instances in a resume? Right? You don't say to chat GBT, write me a resume of someone who's in accounting but has been stressed out because tax season was impending and 4 different clients came on board and I had to prioritize. Like those are specific things to the person that I want to know through an interview, but I can't use that as a guide for me. Basically it's what truly matters to somebody. So the reason why I'm promoting AI tools to help leverage your career management is because these tools are very helpful and they can in many ways save time for you, but there is nothing that is a shortcut. First of all, I believe in writing your own things. I really think that jotting down stuff by handwriting or by typing solidifies for you confidence, right? So an artificial intelligence computer can tell you something, but you can sit there and think about a whole bunch of things about your achievements and write the same thing down, right? Now, in this two paradigms, which one do you think is going to give you more confidence, right? When you go out to the market and you're competing, I think it's the latter. But I'm for that. Maybe I'm old school, but these tools do save you a lot of time. And the point is that that's not going to be what pushes you over the edge, though. That might be something that gets you in the door, but keep in mind that innovation gets up, right? So the first generation of cell phones that were 2G cell phones, maybe even before that were LTE, I'm not sure. But all the cell phone carriers started to produce 2G. So there was no advantage to anyone until the first mover did 3G. And then now everybody followed suit. And so as you sort of scale up, no one actually has a benefit behind that. What it comes down to is you as a person again. And all these personality traits, character traits like faithfulness, perseverance, persistence, grit, all these things really matter. So selfishly as a career coach, I use these tools sometimes to help clients get a foundation, but more importantly, from a coaching perspective, it's really helping people shape their vision, what kind of leader that they want to become, what really matters to them, what kind of question keeps them up at night, what would they spend their whole lives, gladly, rest of their lives trying to solve. This is particularly the case with executives because oftentimes an executive has had like a 30-year career and everyone has patted them on the back for doing something like X very, very well. And the truth is that they've built their career around X and they've made a lot of money around X. But one day they wake up and they realize that X is actually not what they want to really do. That's not the area of impact that they want to have. It's really Y, which is a subset of X maybe, but it's not exactly the same. So these things, artificial intelligence, they're artificial. So they can't tell you that. And as a coach, that's what I try to do. But my point really, after all the said and done, is that, there is room for the tools, but at the same time, know how to leverage them and know when enough is enough. And nothing replaces hard work, pounding the pavement. When you network, you can use the GPT Google Sheets all you want. But at the same time is you've got to become part of a community, right? Before people know that you have the skills or that you're looking for a job in that industry. And that's the only way that they'll know. You have to kind of show up and be yourself in that regard. So, and in the end, it's up to you to define your value proposition. All right, so that's my content for today. I just wanted to kind of briefly, this 40-minute, that's great. But if you have any questions, feel free to drop them down below or just send me a DM afterwards. But I'm really curious to know, as far as AI is concerned, as it's come out, have you benefited from any particular, tool that's been out there that maybe others don't know about, that's really been helpful in prompting you to think more about your career or different ideas that you've never thought about, right? I'd be very curious to know that. So in any case, thank you so much for tuning in. I am going to try to do this weekly. And there's a lot of things to talk about in the whole area of career management, and especially in the age of where technology intersects with human behavior, right? And as a coach, I always my closing argument is always that you should find a coach, because coaches can help you navigate through very difficult situations. All right. Okay. So thanks for joining me, and until next time, I will see you soon.